Well, I didn't want to have to make any more of these stupid Mechanical Monday videos, but got another issue with the Jeep, and we're going to take care of it while we're boondocking at a boondocker's welcome spot in the panhandle of Florida. Got a noise coming from the engine bay, and diagnosed it out to be the power steering pump. Took the serpentine belt off, manually spun all the pulleys, shook them a little bit, found out which one was having the issue. So we got a power steering pump and removal tool and some fluid, and gonna get ready to get rid of this noise. So it's still functioning, but it's definitely on the outs. And here's a word to the wise: if you're out in the middle of nowhere boondocking and you're getting ready to work on a project on your vehicle that is the way you get around, definitely make sure you've got everything you need, because I picked up this power steering pulley and alternator pulley removal tool right there, real nice, but there's no way to reinstall it. So it's not a puller and reinstaller tool. So I had to go get the appropriate threaded bolt. It happened to be a carriage bolt that I had that actually was full thread instead of shoulder bolt, because I bring all kinds of hardware with me, but all of my 3/8/16 stuff is shoulder bolts, and so you need to have the threading on there so that when you go to press the new pulley back on, you can run a nut. And I'm gonna make it work with a nut, a washer, and a socket, and use that as my apparatus to push and press the pulley back on. So had I broken the Jeep down, taken the pump off, had all the lines disconnected, and then realized I didn't have the puller or the reinstaller, would have been a little bit of an issue. So definitely go through and make sure you got everything you're gonna need before you start your project. Otherwise, we'd have been taking that girl into the auto parts store. So we'll get ready to start tearing into this thing. Now that the serpentine belt is off, you can hear and see that that's definitely where the issue is coming from, the shaft on the power steering pump. Making some lovely noise. Alright, so now we got the old one off out of the Jeep. New one's over here without the pulley, so that's where the next test comes in. We have to get the pulley off and pressed on to the new one. It's supposed to be a pretty simple process. There's an indent under that collar there, and this sits right against the shaft. So you get those on over both recesses. Put this on to hold it in place, and then you have to just get 2 wrenches, one to hold the center shaft and one to then crank, and peel it up. Let's see what size those are. Obviously, I'm struggling here. Time to bring out the big guns. Well, map gas never hurt anybody, right? Well, I think my tool is ruined. Great. Well, that was way worse than it had to be. Yeah. So the first issue we had, the main issue we had, is the fact that this $31 pulley pulling tool that didn't come with a pulley install mechanism decided that it wanted to have some tapered threads, so only a couple threads caught when you first started trying to pull the pulley, so it just stripped the threads right off. So had to cut the end of the pulley pulling tool off and start shorter, which means you don't have the same amount of throw to pull all the pulley off in one stroke. So then I had to work it off. I'd pull a little bit and then stick something else down inside. I was grabbing nuts and sticking them down on top to extend the length of the shaft, and that became a super big pain in the neck. But the pulley's off. Now we get to try and use my makeshift form of pulley installer tool to get it back on the brand new part. Wish me luck. Houston, we have a problem. We've been smelling some exhaust fumes at idle. Not driving down the road, but when we sit in idle, we've been smelling just a little bit of exhaust fumes. And the way our bed is set up in the back is the bed is the opening to the engine bay. And there's a seal, a rubber seal around the whole thing. It's pretty darn tight, but in the corners there's just a little potential maybe where some air could get through. But when we opened it up to show some friends the engine, we found that right there, right off the turbo, is a hole blown through the exhaust pipe. And as fate would have it, we are a 1994 Coachman Destiny. Sounds like in 2003, 2005, something like that, Forest River bought out Coachman, and they don't have any digital file of customers' vehicles and what work was done to them prior to 2001. This is 1994. It was all paper files, and they didn't get any of those paper files. So we can't get a part number. We can't figure out what was done. Looking at it now, it looks like 100% custom job because the welds aren't all that great, and it's probably just custom in the first place. But now we get to try to take these two V-band clamps off that have been on for 26 years now, and figure out if we can have a local shop make one or what. But we don't want to have that direct exhaust straight out of the turbo shooting up into the bed, the underside of the bed anymore. And that's my task for today. See where this goes. Actually just took a couple of minutes and we've got the pipe off. Very poor job, Coachman, back in '94. It was functional, but man, it's a V-band clamp on this side and that side. That's standard, good to go. Piece of 90 pipe. Then a smaller V-band clamp to go off the turbo, but instead of actually putting the V-band adapter on there, they just took a small piece of pipe and kind of maybe put a little flare on it, just enough to make the clamp grab, but garbledy-goop welds, and I mean, it worked for as long as it did. But gonna have to figure out if we can either grind down and put a patch kit on here until we find a new piece or what, because it is a custom part. It's gonna be hard to find a replacement without just going to a shop and having it custom made. And the other issue was it was held in place, supported with a U-bolt, and of course U-bolt, both of them snapped off while I was taking them off. The V-bands came off, which is nice because they're like a $50 clamp at least. This is going to be $8 to $10 I'll have to replace, but better than having to replace these guys. So now we'll try to grind down and see if maybe we can just, it's obviously going to rust out all the way along this seam. That was the DOM tubing seam, and it's thin there, different metals. So at least temporarily I'll see if I can't grind a nice flush plate. We can get a scabbed piece of metal on there and close off this gap so it's not blown into our bedroom. So clean it up and then see if there's a local shop that wants to work with us and weld a piece of plate on top of that. Well, we got our exhaust section back from the weld shop. They actually ended up taking a piece of like half by half square stock and bending it to match the bend, because even though the hole was only here to here, everything else along the weld seam from the tube was gonna be going out soon anyways, so welded it on actually all the way along that seam so that any future potential for blowing through should be taken care of. Gonna go ahead and get this pipe back on. Got a little late on us here, but gonna try to get her back in there. There to there. Got our turbo hanging out inside there, so it's a direct fit right off the turbo to the exhaust. Not sure if you can see that or not. It's in focus, but that's the issue right there. Bearing was just blown out after 210,000 miles. She's all better now. Well, the hard part's over now. Pulley's back on the new pump. Now it's a matter of hooking the lines back up, throwing 3 bolts back in, filling it up, turning it on, cycling the steering rack back and forth, get rid of all the air bubbles, and hopefully we also got rid of that ugly growl that was happening in there. I'm sure we did. So get ready to throw it back together. You want to make sure to get all 3 of your bolts started before you tighten any of them down. Make your life so much easier rather than having something just off and start cross-threading a bolt in there. You just get them all in there with your fingers, get them started, get them going a few threads in, then you know they're all lined up. You can work your way around them, tightening everything down. Belt's back on, throw some fluid in. Now we can fire up the Jeep, run the rack back and forth, try to get the air bubbles out, and make sure the belt and pulley are on nice. Well, sounds good so far. Run it through its paces a couple more times and we should be all set. And keep nice and quiet. No more nasty growling. Then there's the clutch kicking on you up. I'd say that was a boondocker's welcome success. Just took her for a quick test drive down the road, and the steering is actually even tighter. It had a little bit of a bobble that when you'd go straight you could turn the wheel just a little bit, bounce back and forth between left and right going straight, and now it's nice and solid. Power steering works good, no leaks. Got an audience. So another successful Mechanical Monday. There's the real audience. What you doing, bud? Huh? Watching Papa fix stuff? Yeah. You wanna jump down here? Jump in the Jeep? Huh? Meow, meow, meow. Sniffing that Florida air.
He loves the sniffers.